Good morning, gang. I'm going to be talking to you today about mounting a scope to a tactical carbine. I'm going to go over just the basic installation procedure. I will tell you that there's a lot of personal preference that goes into mounting an optic on any kind of a firearm. So if you see some things that are different from the way you learned to do it, or if you don't see me using a certain tool or a certain type of thing that you think is necessary, just understand this is the way I mount the optic to this particular carbine. There are different ways to go about it. There are a lot of tools and a lot of gadgets out there to help make this job easier. Some of them actually do make it easier. Some of them just help make your wallet a little bit lighter. If you really want to use those things, go ahead and use them. I've just found over the years that the way that I'm about to show you is the way that works for me. The optic mount that I'm going to be using today is the Burris PEPR mounting system. I'm going to be mounting it to my M&P 15 rifle, and the optic that we're going to be using today is the Leatherwood CMR scope. By the way, I found this to be a very, very good optic. I've been very happy with the CMR to this point. The first thing I'm going to do is just do a rough mount of my base onto the Picatinny rail on top of the receiver of my rifle. And I'm going to put it in the rearmost position. Have to loosen the bolts a little bit just to be able to get on there. And I'm just going to tighten this up enough to hold it on there. I'm not going to crank it down really tight. Next thing I'm going to do is a rough mount of my optic itself. And I'm going to position it so that the turrets are roughly at the midway point between the two rings. And now I'm going to lightly attach the top half of each ring. Each one of these has 3 screws. And all I'm going to do at this point is put these on here and just tighten them down to the point that they're not going to fall off and the scope's not going to move around real sloppy. I don't want to try to crank these things down real tight at this point. By the way, whenever I tighten screws, even when I'm doing it loosely, I alternate the screws a little bit like tightening down lug bolts on a tire. This is the way I've always done it. I've found that that helps out some to keep the tension even on the rings and on the optic. But again, this is just bringing it down enough so that nothing's going to fall off or fall out. Because what we're going to have to do next is set our eye relief with this scope. By the way, when you are installing this, try to keep your gap on either side of the rings about the same size. You don't want to have it all the way cranked down on one side and then a gap on the other side. It's going to make it difficult to center your reticle, which is going to be something we're going to take care of later on. Oops. Maybe the bit fell out of my screwdriver. Alright, that ought to hold it for our purposes right now. The next thing we're going to do is try to figure out our proper eye relief for this particular optic. Now with the AR platform, particularly with the collapsible stock, this is going to take a little bit of thought on your part. Because you're going to have to figure out where you normally have this stock when you're using the rifle. If you've always got it at the fully extended position, that's going to be different than if you normally have it all the way forward, as far as where you're going to position the scope in the rings. I need to give this just a little bit more tension because the scope is sliding around here. There we go. Hold it. Now some of this determination is going to be made by the environment or the conditions under which you normally deploy your rifle. If, for example, you're wearing a heavy tactical vest that necessitates you to move that stock up some, that's going to require you to adjust this differently again than, like I said, if you always have it fully extended and you're not worried about a vest. Basically, it's patrol versus tactical use for this particular stage. So what we're going to do, once you figure out which way you normally do this, I usually keep this thing, this rifle rides in my vehicle, and basically this is a rapid deployment type of a system. Chances are I'm not going to be wearing a heavy tactical vest if I have to bail out for an active shooter or something like that. So I'm going to adjust it. Normally I am one click in from full extension with this particular rifle when I'm using it. So I am going to adjust my eye relief to this point. So I need to open up the scope covers, and I'm just going to bring this up. Some people will tell you to do this on the lowest power. Some people will tell you it doesn't matter. I like to set these 1 to 4 power scopes at the mid-range, because what I've noticed is if I always set it to the lowest power, when I crank it up on the higher power, my eye relief changes some. If I set it at the mid-range and set my eye relief for that, then usually that's going to be good whether I'm at the 1 power or all the way out at 4 power. And try this a couple of different ways. You want to make sure that you've got a complete scope picture, that you don't see any shadows in your scope or any tunneling or funneling or anything like that. And this is actually looking pretty good right here. Try it with both eyes open, try it with one eye open. It actually looks pretty good. Now what you can do for gross movements, if you're setting it up, and again, especially if you're wearing a tactical vest, you need to really move this forward. You can loosen the bolts and actually move the entire mount. That's why you have such a long stretch of Picatinny here, so you can adjust it forward or backwards. Right now, this looks pretty good. What I'm about to do is start to torque down my screws. Now before I do that, I am going to center my reticle. Now here's one of the places where a lot of people have got all kinds of different ways that they use feeler gauges underneath the base. They put levels on top, levels on the rifle, levels here, levels there. What I found, particularly with this is basically a 0 to 100 yard system. If I'm preparing a precision rifle that's going to be fired at longer distances, I'll do this a little bit differently. But for this one, what I'm going to do is back off a little bit. Might need to adjust my stand so I can see in here. And I'm going to come down here where I can see through the scope. And I will be able to see the stadia lines from the reticle. And from a distance, I can get an idea of whether they look like they are perfectly aligned or not. Particularly this vertical stadia. It should look like the line is going right straight down into the rifle stock and a straight line right down through the stock. If you're not seeing that, chances are you're going to need to adjust that a little bit. This isn't looking too bad. I think the whole rifle might be canted just a tiny bit. That might help. Yeah, that's not looking bad at all. Maybe just a tiny adjustment counterclockwise. Now you can also see the horizontal stadia and see if that looks like it's making a straight line right through your windage turret. And right now this is looking pretty good. What I'm going to do to make it a little easier to see is turn on the illumination so I can see the lines a little easier. And I don't think I'm going to screw with that at all. What I'm going to go over next is the torque, actually torquing down the screws and the bolts on here. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I think I'm going to have to make a part 2 because I'm probably already up against my 10-minute time limit. So.